Hi everyone, the best teeth in the game here. You know who it is, the internet's busiest music nerd, Mr. Anthony Fantano, and it's time for another edition of Let's Argue, where I go online, I accept your hot takes, uninformed, unpopular opinions, and your tough questions, and I respond to the best ones in this video. This is the video where I respond to the best ones. Let's go. Cole Bennett using lesser-known artists to make music videos is the equivalence of an industry plant due to the popularity of it. What the hell are you talking about? What the hell are you even talking about? What are you talking about? Cole Bennett using lesser-known artists to make music videos. He uses lesser-known artists to make music videos, okay, but they also use him to make music videos. It's kind of a two-way street. Is the equivalence of an industry plant, somebody who is brought into the industry by a record label without, much of a following or anything like that, and they just kind of take a chance on them, they invest in them, they get them a record deal, so on and so forth, without them having a crowd or an audience already. So Cole Bennett, he's using lesser-known artists as the equivalence of an industry plant due to the popularity of it. So are you basically saying that Cole Bennett using lesser-known artists is basically the equivalent of a record label signing an industry plant? More often than not, when Cole Bennett does bring in lesser-known artists on to do a music video, using his brand and using his amazing visuals and using his talents, he typically ends up blowing them up. But more often than not, Cole has pretty good taste when it comes to the current wave of trap music. He really kind of knows what's popping. He knows what sounds great. He usually picks, very carefully, I imagine, who it is he ends up working with, especially with everybody wanting to work with him. I'm sure there are thousands of artists banging down his door trying to get, a music video or something. So again, I'm not really seeing the point that you're making here. Is it an attack? Is it a compliment? I'm not really sure. All I know at the end of the day is shout out to Cole Bennett. Dude does a good job. Billie Eilish just sounds like a discount lord. I kind of see what you're saying. Billie, I heard her initial EP last year. I thought it was boring as hell. The instrumentals lacked life. The vocals were really just painfully average, and I did kind of hear the Lord influence there. I didn't really hear a single hit on that whole thing, and I was just flabbergasted as to why she started just gaining traction out of nowhere. I did not really see what was so interesting about her outside of there was some really expensive and interesting visual design going into what she was doing. Her outfits as well are pretty eccentric. It's only been until recently that I've seen a couple interesting music videos and well-performed singles that I was like, okay, I hear the potential here. I'm basically trying to accept and understand that she's still a relatively young artist with a lot of attention on her right now, and where she could go artistically is really anywhere at this point, and I will kind of just wait to make any sort of final judgment call on her ability and what it is she's doing until I hear a full-length album, because the EP to me seemed very much like a starter and not much else, and for me that's not really enough information to go on to say, okay, this is definitively whether or not Billie is going to be going anywhere. And one more thing that makes that an especially tough call is that there seems to be tons and tons and tons of industry money behind trying to push her to becoming a thing. And I think there are some artists out there with big enough of a budget and enough connections. They do end up making great music, and that can maybe be the case for Billie. The Grateful Dead are unreasonably underrated due to forever being associated with annoying stoners / drug dealers. Yeah, I don't know. The Grateful Dead, for sure, they do have an annoying stoner audience that fits a certain look and a stereotype, but I don't know, they're just evangelizing their favorite band like anybody else evangelizes their favorite band. I think the reason most people are not into the Grateful Dead, including ya boy over here, is really that I'm just not that into the music. I don't really care for the jammy, psyche, folky style that they they have going on. I don't care for it that much. There are groups that I enjoy that they have most definitely influenced, but I don't really care that much for the Grateful Dead, honestly. Not a big Deadhead. And me personally, I don't really give a shit, who's a fan of your stuff. If your fans are all totally nice, if your fans are all degenerate assholes or whatever. If you make music I like, I listen to your music. You haven't given Alex Turner a fair shot considering you think a lot of his work sounds like Britpop when it clearly isn't. Where is this coming from? What is this coming from? I say one Arctic Monkeys album kind of has some Britpop undertones to it, and you literally think that I think a lot of Alex Turner's work sounds like Britpop. The first Arctic Monkeys album is most definitely not a Britpop album. I've never said that. The latest Arctic Monkeys album is definitely not a Britpop album. Where have you gotten this information that I think most of the music Alex Turner makes sounds like Britpop? Furthermore, what makes you think that even if most of his music did sound like Britpop, that I wouldn't like it? I don't really have anything against Britpop. I don't dislike Britpop. It's not like it's one of my least favorite genres of music or something like that. I mean, I grew up with it on the radio. There are a lot of Britpop bands from back in the day that I liked a lot. So honestly, I don't know why this tweet exists. Album of the year lists shouldn't be put out until January. Yeah, I mean, I disagree. I do think generally that there are a lot of sites that are dropping their lists a little early, like putting out your list in November. Like, Jesus Christ, come on. Give me a break. But I think once you're at about mid-December, you can safely put out your album of the year lists. I mean, the holidays are coming up. Most likely artists and labels aren't going to be working, much less releasing significant music in that span of time. I mean, maybe some smaller, more independent artists may use that weird limbo period to drop something to grab people's attention since nothing else is coming out, which is totally fine. I mean, in the past, I have taken records that have dropped in that weird transitional period in the week or so between 2017 and 2018 or whatever, and then thrown it onto a list. I mean, I guess if a great album comes out at the very tail end of the year before, just that's all. It's not a big deal. HMLTD is just what the 1975 wants to be. Yeah, I mean, as much as I do like HMLTD, their new EP is great. You should check out their new EP. I do not think that is what the 1975 wants to sound like. If anything, I think on their last EP, HMLTD were trying to go a little bit more mainstream and clean their sound up a little bit more and get a bit more contemporary, get a bit more with the times. Not to say that I think they want to sound like 1975 though, but yeah, I very, very much disagree. I think the creative and inspirational crossover between HMLTD and the 1975 is a very, very, very small. The internet has given taste-making back into the hands of the people thanks to websites like Rate Your Music. Artists like Fishman's, Ray Little Abacus, and more recently Avondale Bowling Club have all emerged from fans spreading through sites like these. Yes, this is absolutely true. I mean, these artists have not sort of gained mainstream fame necessarily, but they have certainly gained followings online thanks to like you just said, Rate Your Music, or even the site Album of the Year, or Sputnik Music. Basically, these crowdsourced sites where fans can jump on and sort of rate albums, write little reviews. And I think these sites are great. I, for one, have been turned on to lots of records that I've then turned around and reviewed on my channel before because of these sites, because some random ass album gets a lot of positive ratings and it climbs up the rankings of the Album of the Year charts. And I'm like, oh, that sounds curious. I'll give that a try. And personally, I love it. I love seeing these platforms where hardcore music fans can jump on and celebrate what is actually interesting, what is actually cutting edge, what is actually exciting. Of course, these sites are not perfect. They do have their biases and they do have their crowds of people that tend to favor and rate very highly certain artists or certain albums or certain genres no matter what. But once you kind of understand the biases, they're actually really fantastic. It's certainly more refreshing and interesting than just kind of like having a bunch of random tracks thrown at you in a Spotify playlist. I know for most people, finding out about music this way is not the most convenient, it isn't the easiest, it's not the most fun, but I don't know. It's one of the many ways I like to do it. Power to the people, musical democratization, all that good stuff. This little exchange kind of confused me. Grey Poupon is only referenced in rap music because it is seen as the most luxurious brand of mustard, not because it tastes good. Honestly, it's a crime to the mustard industry that rappers don't choose to promote a quality brand of mustard. This other person says, it's also phonetically fun to say / rhymes with a lot of stuff. It's basically a rap meme. And then there are plenty of words that rhyme with French's yellow classic, but rappers don't use the phrase because it's seen as inferior mustard. If Grey Poupon is a rap meme, then I think that it's dead and it's time for a new wave of mustard raps. What do I even say about this? What do I even say about this? I mean, our tweeter here does have a point in that if you are going to reference mustard in a rap song and you are the type of rapper who usually trends toward materialism in their rhymes, you are most likely going to reference the most expensive kind of mustard, just like if you're going to reference your jeans or your shoes or your chain or your car, you're going to reference the most expensive kind of all of those too. And honestly, when it comes to all of those things, none of that stuff is really referenced for the taste of any of it either, really just the price tag. Metal Machine music is actually a good noise record. It can range from scattered melody to drone, like from shrill cacophony to somewhat beauty, so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, it's a great record, and it's just another time in Lou Reed's discography, and there are plenty of moments like these where he's just friggin' ahead of the curve. He's there first. He does it before everybody else, or he does it better than everybody else at the time. I mean, if he had the visibility that he had in the 1980s when he and the Velvet Underground dropped White Light, White Heat, nobody would have been ready for that shit. In fact, I mean, nobody really was ready for much of what the Velvet Underground was doing, which is why they kind of blew up after the fact. Nobody was obviously ready for what he did with Metallica on Lulu. And not to say that I think society is going to do a total 180 on that record and understand it as genius. I mean, these days society still doesn't even really appreciate what he did with Metal Machine music. But I would like to at least think when the contextual hatred that Metallica fans have for Lou Reed and Lou Reed fans have for Metallica, and a new audience who is totally sort of on the outside of those biases, because that's really what guided a lot of negativity toward the record. When a new league of music fans who are outside of those biases can give the record a shot, they might see that Lou Reed's poetry on the record is actually kind of unsettling and harrowing and dark and weird and entertaining. They might see that some of the backing instrumentation that Metallica brought is actually not that bad. And they might be able to appreciate the juxtaposition of this heavy thrash style with Lou Reed's very old, weary, warbly voice. I'm not saying it's a perfect record, but I do think there are a lot of things about Lulu that music fans definitely overlook and do not appreciate to the extent that they should. The Die Hard soundtrack is a Christmas album. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the musical equivalent to arguing that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, which, I mean, in a way it kind of is. So, I mean, I guess that could also apply to the soundtrack, but it's a super weak argument. You're really skating on thin ice there. Jimmy Fallon does not deserve the Roots. I mean, I hate to agree with this one, but I kind of agree. However, the Roots do deserve to be on late night. They absolutely do deserve to be on late night. So, you know, who's to say? Yeah, Jimmy Fallon, he doesn't deserve the Roots, but the Roots do deserve to be on TV. They deserve to be celebrated. They deserve to be getting paid regularly. They deserve the spotlight that they currently have. So, you know, I'm okay with it for the Roots' sake. Jameson came out with a better album this year than Justin Timberlake has ever released. Ouch, ouch. But I kind of agree. I mean, Jameson's new record, it is a sexy, thrilling, smooth, funky R&B experience that is pretty great. It's pretty great. I mean, sure, it's not a perfect record, but it has a lot of amazing moments on it. It certainly kicks Justin Timberlake's latest album's ass. I think it also gives a red-hot beatdown to the very overrated 2020 experience. You go back to Future Sex Love Sounds, you're really getting into debate territory there, but honestly, I still prefer the new Jameson album to even that. And hey, I think this is one of the many examples of when an artist who you're not really all that crazy about can influence the work of an artist who you enjoy so much more. So there you go. Complex absolutely fucked it by including Scorpion in their top 50 album of the year list, most forgettable project this year. I haven't looked at the Complex list yet, but knowing what Complex covers and the albums they typically tend to favor, I don't know why you wouldn't have expected Scorpion to be on the list. On top of it, I don't really know if I could say that that is one of the more forgettable albums of the year. There are certainly some highlights on that record, and even some tracks that I didn't like initially through their virality have stuck with me despite still I'm not all that crazy about them. Kiki, do you love me? And everybody, I'm going to leave it at that. That has been the latest episode of Let's Argue. Thank you for watching. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, argue, 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 forever.